Hi, everyone. I wanted to talk to you about Journal Entry 6, Analyzing Descriptive Scenes. For this one, you're not going to copy any of these slides into your digital reader's journal. You're just going to create a couple blank slides in your reader's journal to do this activity once you're ready. These slides are just instruction for you, and I'm going to go over all of that right now in this video. The first thing that you're going to do is pick a couple of techniques on slide 2, which we'll get to in a minute. And then you'll be explaining how these techniques develop your story and deepen its meaning. And then step 2 is that you're going to create a pre-write of some sort, boxes and bullets or a web or an outline to plan out your response based on places in your novel that you have marked. And then the third step is to write a full, long analysis in paragraph form, which will look a lot like an essay when you're finished, about these descriptive scenes, your analysis of these descriptive scenes, okay? And you're going to use the following slides and obviously this video to help you, all right? Again, don't copy these slides into your reader's notebook. So let's move on. Slide 2, you'll see that we have narrative writers' techniques, okay? And writers use these techniques to create a goal, which is either providing context, background information, introducing the characters, showing the character's motivation, stirring empathy, creating the scene, building a mood, setting up a problem, raising the stakes of that problem, building suspense around that problem, getting readers predicting, supporting the theme or lesson, and then finally showing the resolution. Obviously, all of these things might happen in your novel, but you don't need to pick all of them. You just want to pick one or two or more if you feel like you can do that. On this slide, I explain what each of these things is. So providing background information. Does your author provide historical, scientific, or otherwise additional information so you can understand the novel better? For introducing the characters, does your author offer you descriptive details about each character, physical or personality traits, or maybe how he or she feels about these characters? Does your author show the character's motivation? Why does your main character do the things he or she does? What motivates them or excites them? Stirring empathy. Does your author make you feel sorry or sad for one of the characters? Why or why not? What is happening? And how is your author describing that to make you feel that way? Creating the setting. How does your author use imagery? And we know that imagery are those 5 sensory descriptions, right? Hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, or seeing, to create a visual in your mind of the setting. Building a mood. As a reader, how do you feel during some scenes? Can you explain what is making you feel that way? Setting up the problem. What is your main conflict in the novel? What is the main conflict in the novel that underlines the rest of the problems? There has to be one main problem that is sort of causing the other problems or is at the root of the other problems. Raising the stakes. How does the author make the problem worse? Right? The problem may have been bad to begin with, but what are some other things that are making that problem even more complex or compounding the problem, meaning adding to the problem? Build suspense. What passages make you worried with anticipation that something bad is going to happen during your reading, or maybe something exciting is going to happen during your reading? Which leads to the next one, getting readers predicting. What scenes make you think about and try to figure out what will happen next? Supporting the theme. What scenes or passages make you feel like you are learning a life lesson from the novel? And finally, showing the resolution. What scenes or passages are at the very end of your novel? Pick one or more of these that you can easily identify in your novel. If you can't find it easily in your novel or an example of it, then don't pick it. Usually, you'll know when you're going through these or when I was explaining them, there might have been scenes that were popping up in your head in your novel that you knew kind of matched these. If nothing was popping up in your head, then maybe you're not that far along in your novel yet. And maybe you need to spend some time reading chapters 1, 2, and 3 of your novel, and then come back to this and try it again at a later time. Okay, so my sample slides. As you all know, I'm reading John Krakauer's Into Thin Air. I love this book so far, and it's really making me think about climbing. I selected 4 of the boxes from the previous page because I think they all connect to build a mood of suspense. On the following slide, I used the web to plan my ideas, and many of my quotes came from Post-it notes that I was marking as I was reading, mostly parts that really got me thinking about how badly this expedition was going. You see how many Post-it notes I add to my books in the classroom, so they all matter to me, and it was easy for me to add quotes because I could just go back and take a look at those areas in my book that I have already marked with Post-it notes. My writing tends to be formal. I mean, I am an English teacher, but yours doesn't need to be so formal. It just needs to be fully developed and at least a full page of writing using a 10 to 12 font. The font that you see on this particular slide 4 is 16. This is too big, so there won't be enough words. And notice I filled this whole page with 16 font, and there's not that many words on this page. So you'll need to use 10 or 12 font. If you choose to write on paper, you want to write a full notebook page of paper, in response. So it's really important that you understand this assignment. I want you to write long on purpose. I want you to show me the volume with which you can analyze some scenes in your novel. And if you do write it on paper, you will have to upload an image in your reader's notebook of the paper that you wrote. All right, so let's look at my samples. The first sample is my web. So you can see that this is actually me planning out my response. And these are the 4 I picked: setting up the problem, raise the stakes, create suspense, and get the readers predicting. I felt like they all kind of work together to create a mood of suspense. And I used descriptive scenes from my novel to develop this. So to set up the problem, I wrote John Krakauer felt that he had maybe taken on more than he could handle with agreeing to climb Everest for an exclusive Outside magazine article. On page 28, he confesses, "Truth be told, I've never been higher than 17,200 feet altitude, not even as high as Everest Base Camp." That sets up the problem because obviously I am thinking, wow, this guy shouldn't be climbing Everest, right? He's never been this far before. So I marked that in my book as an original passage when I first read it, because I was surprised to read that, because John Krakauer's become this like famous climbing person due to this novel. And here, truth be told, this is he never climbed anything higher than 17,000 feet before Everest, which I was just really surprised at. So I marked that with my Post-it note. Raise the stakes. John Krakauer forces the reader to understand the treacherous ascent when he writes, "My teammate recalled seeing a young Sherpa fall down it and said in a troubled voice when I looked up and saw a person tumbling down from above, falling head over heels, screaming as he went past, and left a trail of blood." And when I read that in the book, I marked it because it freaked me out a little bit. Like, could you imagine being on this mountain and you're climbing and all of a sudden somebody cartwheels past you screaming and, crying and there's blood being spattered. And I just thought how terrible of a situation that must have been. Creating suspense. John Krakauer further raises the stakes by explaining that while he felt he was inexperienced, he was a lot more capable than many of the other clients in expeditions on the mountain during that time. One group in particular had a reputation for recklessness that put all of the other groups at risk. He explains that they feared that this group would get itself into a calamity that would force other groups to come to its aid, thereby risking more lives. And I marked that because he goes into full explanation about this Taiwanese group that, clearly had paid a lot of money to climb, this other mountain that he was talking about, not Everest. And this group got into trouble and other groups had to risk their lives to save this Taiwanese group. And, no one wanted to climb with them. And here they were on Everest at the same time John Krakauer's expedition was up there. So they were all very concerned that these people were going to get themselves into trouble and everybody was going to have to save them. Get readers predicting. At the end of chapter 7, where I currently am in my reading, Krakauer concludes with a quote from his expedition leader, Rob Hall. Hall states, "With so many incompetent people on the mountain, I think it's pretty unlikely that we'll get through this season without something bad happening up high." And I felt like that forced me to predict that something bad was going to happen. And again, I admit here that I'm only on chapter 7 of my book. And, so to say that you're not finished reading your book, so you can't really write long. This is a book that has many, many, many chapters. So 7 is the very beginning of this book, really, even though it's chapter 7. And I still felt like I could have enough examples to write this example. So here you have it. Here's my writing long, and I'll read it out loud to you. There are many descriptive scenes in Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer that supply the reader with visual beauty and wonder of the environment of Mount Everest. However, many more of these descriptive scenes create a mood of suspense in the reader, and I fear for John's life along with the lives of his expedition mates. He first sets up the problem by explaining that he felt he had no business climbing Mount Everest in the first place due to his inexperience at high altitudes. He felt that he had maybe taken on more than he could handle with agreeing to climb Everest for an exclusive outside magazine article. On page 28, he confesses, "Truth be told, I've never been higher than 17,000 feet altitude, not even as high as Everest Base Camp. This sets up some conflict because I started to feel that he shouldn't be climbing there." Further on in the novel, the author raises the stakes by forcing the reader to understand the treacherous ascent when he writes, "My teammate recalled seeing a young Sherpa fall down it and said in a troubled voice when I looked up and saw a person tumbling down from above, falling head over heels, screaming as he went past and left a trail of blood. This scene gave me chills, and I thought about what it must have been like to see someone die such a violent, tragic death on an ice wall that I was currently climbing." To make matters even more suspenseful, Jon Krakauer further raises the stakes by explaining that while he felt he was inexperienced, he was a lot more capable than many of the other clients and expeditions on the mountain during that time. One group in particular had a reputation for recklessness that put all of the other groups at risk. He explains that they feared that this group would get itself into a calamity that would force other groups to come to its aid, thereby risking more lives. In this way, I became even more scared of his group because not only must they deal with their own fears and problems, but now they must also worry about these other groups who clearly don't know what they're doing. All of these descriptions had me thinking negatively about the future success of their expedition, and at the end of chapter 7, where I currently am in my reading, Krakauer concludes with a quote from his expedition leader, Rob Hall. Hall states, "With so many incompetent people on the mountain, I think it's pretty unlikely that we'll get through this season without something bad happening up high." In conclusion, Jon Krakauer has given me so many descriptive passages that hint at danger that I predict that his expedition will face danger so bad that some of the people he mentions will die. I also know this because Rob Hall is a famous climber who died on Mount Everest, and I keep wondering if this is the expedition when it happened. So as you can see, my writing long essay here, my analysis, really sounded a lot like my pre-plan. You can see that there's areas where it was word for word. So I kind of made my web almost formally written so that writing my essay would be a lot easier. This is unnecessary. You don't need to do that. You can make your pre-writing pretty simple and then figure it out in your writing. And this kid who actually does an analysis of descriptive passages does that. You can see how his web is very simply written. He picked symbols and details, and he picked some other crafts here that you can look at. And he's looking at author's attitude, theme, and central idea here. And you can see that his pre-writing is very simple, but he does manage to pull out a nice long analysis of tone and theme and central idea, which is what were, his choices. So I think that's a pretty good explanation of what you need to do. So again, Journal 6, analyzing descriptive scenes. Pick 2 of these. If you feel like you can't, then maybe you're not far enough in your novel and you need to read a little farther. Here is, once again, a detailed description of each one of these things. And here are some samples to get you through it. So good luck with your writing today, and I look forward to seeing what you put together.